I would hazard to guess that when we were children, we heard many stories that began once upon a time. Right? We began once upon a time. And no matter what happened in the story, it would end with, and they all lived happily together. Right? From our earliest childhood memories, we heard that there's going to be a princess and there's going to be a prince, and some way or another the prince is going to save the princess, and they all live happily ever after, right? I found myself as I was beginning to raise children going, what message am I sending in those stories? Have you noticed? I never saw one where there was a princess and a princess, or a prince and a prince. Did you ever hear one? And did you notice that there's always someone being rescued? Not two people coming together in mutuality or support and growth? It is something so deeply embedded in our being, isn't it? In our conscious, that we are to one be a rescuer, one to be a rescuee, and we all live happily together ever after. Isn't that the expectation? And that's true, right? We are all living happily together ever after. No problems, no stresses. It is all cotton candy and roses and chocolate. Right? Every day. That's not truth, is it? The truth is, it's hard. It's hard to live. We live in a broken world. Things happen in our world. However, the world pushes us to live happily together ever after. And Christianity tends to push us to be happily ever after, right? I found Jesus, no more problems. I'm going to heaven, it's all good. And the reality is, what do we do when it hurts? What do we do when it cuts us to the quick? When it kicks us in the stomach and we go, I don't think I can do another moment. Everything around us is saying, it's happily ever after. And it is against all of the programming for us to say, God, why? God, why am I in pain? Why can't this happen? This is a critical component of the gift of lament. And that's one of the things that I think we have lost in our faith tradition. The book of Psalms has lots of laments, and a lament is a cry from your depth of your being. It's from where you say, okay, I'm not going to be this happily ever after superficial thing anymore. I'm going to say, deep down in my gut, I hurt. God, I'm crying out to you. I need you, God. Help me. James Howell, who's a theologian, says that a lament is a cry out in grief, but it's about God, who knows my grief, but does not leave me alone in my grief, but perhaps climbs into the pit with me in my grief. Now, I might not feel God in that pit with me, which is part of the lament. But if we always are in a place where we can't acknowledge that deep, retching part in our life, then where are we truly human? Where are we truly open to God moving and working in our lives? Nancy Clays Walford, who's a theologian and teacher at the McAfee School of Theology in Atlanta, Georgia, lines out a classic lament for us. She says there's about 5 things, and you can probably see it in this lament here. The first thing that we do, she calls it, in flowery words, invocation. It's a prayer. It's actually saying, my God! Calling God. Saying, hey, listen to me. I'm calling out to you. Hear the difference in urgency? Dear God, thank you for this day. My God, I'm calling out to you. Where are you most engaged? In that moment of crying out, my God, hear me. And notice it's not, oh, you stranger. It's, my God. Where are you? You can kind of hear that in verses 1 and 2. My God, why have you forsaken me? And then there's a complaint in the typical lament. You're telling God what's wrong. God, I'm a worm. These people are against me. The angels, the bulls, and the dogs are surrounding me. Here's my problem. And then, what do you want God to do? Deliver me, oh God. Take me out of this mire. Take me out of this mess. Take me out of this problem. And then eventually there's that expression of trust. God, I've seen you before act in my life. I've seen you before work in my life. And so even though there's no reason to believe it's going to get good right now, I'm going to trust you. Just because you got a history of that. But I've seen you do it in the Bible. I've seen you do it in the lives of other people. And even though that doesn't feel right now, I'm going to trust you. And then the final shift is that of great praise and adoration, because you've passed through that moment of hurt, that gut-wrenching moment of anguish, and you can celebrate. You can be free and in full joy of the great works that God has done. And you can see it in this psalm, right? God, where are you? Here's what's wrong. I'm encompassed by dogs. Deliver me. You've helped the people of Israel before. You carried me, and as a mother would carry a child. And now all the ends of the earth will praise you. There are laments that are uniquely individual in the Psalms, and there's laments that are communal for the congregation. There's actually one lament that never speaks to trust, that never speaks to praise. It's Psalm 88. The whole lament is, God, where are you? Why am I alone? This is horrible. Here's my complaint. Deliver me. And it ends with, my companions and I are in darkness. I don't know about you, but there's been times in my life when it just hurts. And there's the pressure all around to act like it doesn't. Got to be strong. And sometimes you just need to be able to sit and say, it hurts. I'm in pain. I'm in darkness. God feels far away. I invite you, I invite all of us to begin to learn to lament with one another. It is hard work to take that moment and say, you know, I'm really sick about this. I'm hurting about this. I am crying in my pillow at night. I wake up at 4 in the morning and allow my pity party to happen, but nobody else can know. It's time for us to break down the walls between us, to be able to share those places in our hearts that hurt, to be transparent with one another, to cry out to God with one another. And when someone reaches out to us to just say, I am grieving, I need to cry out, that we allow the opportunity to just sit with them in the pain, to be there with them and not to rush them along to the happy thing. You're not alone. God is good. It's all going to be fine. There's important work done when we sit in the pain. There have been moments in my ministry that have been extremely painful. There was a pumpkin patch several years ago that I was just popping by on a Saturday, and I got a call from Children's Hospital. There was a doctor on the floor, and there was a family whose child was about 18 months old. They lived about 2.5 hours away in Illinois. Their child had fallen into their backyard swimming pool. They didn't find him until it was really too late, but not immediately did he die. And they rushed him to Children's Hospital, and they had been working with him, but he's brain dead. Too far for their pastor to come. Would I come? And I remember looking at City Pillow on the pumpkin patch when I got the call, and I said, why did they call me? And I walked into that room, and I saw grandmothers and grandfathers. And I saw that mom take her little boy, 18 months, and crawl onto his bed with all the tubes around him and all the blinking machines, and hold him to her breast as she had to her heart, and wept on him, cried, my little boy, my little baby boy. And the depth of that moment will be with me forever. And I had to sit with her in that moment. Eventually, she was able to process through her grief. And it was time to begin the end-leave process. I could have said, oh, it'll be okay. He's going to heaven. He's going to be with God. He's going to be with Jesus. It's going to be all right. You're going to get through it. There's going to be healing. That would have been intrusive. Wouldn't have been faithful. I have been so blessed to be in times of desperation with both churches and ministry. And I am grateful that there are 2 sanctuaries, because when something really hard is happening at Centenary, I spend the time in here crying and praying to God. And when things are really hard over there or here, I go over there and pray. And what I've found in those times, when I don't know the answer, when the problem seems far bigger than any human being can figure out, I find a depth to God that I had yet to discover. A depth, a deepness, a strength, a foundation that I didn't know, that I even conceive could even be more than who I knew God to be at that moment. Friends, we live in a world where everybody wants us to be happy.